How about Bobby Witt Jr., the star player for the Kansas City Royals, is staying in Kansas City long-term, by the way. He just signed a massive deal. Jeff Passan reported he's going to be in Kansas City, and the deal is upwards of, I believe, around 11 years. But here's the caveat, and this is why I really enjoy this opportunity for Bobby Witt Jr. It's because of the club options. And this is actually kind of genius. So it's a $280 million deal with the option to be 14 years and the value to go to $377 million. And then on the other side of it, there's player opt-outs after the 7th season. So 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th years, he would be, if it was at 7 years, he would be about 31 years old, 31 years old, and have another chance at another contract if he is playing at a high level. And you can see right there, Bobby Witt Jr., great use of a meme right there from Wolf of Wall Street.
No,
I'm not leaving.
Yeah, so is this going to be like, look, we've seen this very few times before, I would say, the Shohei Ohtani contract, as far as like super long-term type contracts, right? Like, is this just going to continue to be a thing where we're seeing decade-long contracts and that's just it, right? Like they just basically sign to a team for life. That's essentially what's happening. Are we going to continue to see that trend, Rip, or is it just going to continue to get longer and longer from here? It almost kind of feels like car payments, right? The terms on car payments just continue to get longer. This kind of feels like that's what it is. Ball clubs can't afford to pay these guys a ridiculous sum in a short term, so they just drag it out as long as they can to get their guy.
Yes, so I think that teams, what you're seeing, there's a lot of players that are being locked up recently. And Rock, you can come in here if you want. Don't be shy. Everyone wants to see your face. I'll talk about it with you right here. Julio Rodriguez, big deal. Bobby Witt Jr., big deal. But this is the thing. It's the conversation of stability. You're getting a contract. You know what you are now. You're not playing the risk, right? Bobby Witt Jr. has locked up a future. He knows he's going to get X amount of money. Julio Rodriguez did this with the Seattle Mariners. And the Orioles, obviously, as they heard that they want to continue to add some of the young talent, right? So I think it's going to continue to be a trend with teams, but not every team's going to play that game. Corbin Carroll signed a deal before he was Rookie of the Year, and his value is a little bit lower, but you're hoping if he plays well at the end of his, or his end of his contract, he'll have a second contract because he's that young. So it really depends on age a lot, Brad. But for this deal, the opt-out's important. The opt-out is essential here because it gives the player now the opportunity that if you are playing at a high level, that you can go cash in and get another big contract. And I'll be honest, I like seeing players continue to sign with their teams.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if this was already pointed out, but
oh my goodness.
Oh my God. His dad is his agent, represents him. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Ryan. I'm not saying that it's not great for the players, but what about the team itself? Like it's we look at some of these super long contracts. We always kind of have that running joke of Bobby Bonilla Day and stuff like that. Like how long it seems as if there is a lot of risk being taken on the organization side, right? I mean, you look at the Dodgers, for example, in that Shohei Ohtani deal, Shohei Ohtani could just fall off a cliff. And I'm not saying that he won't, but like talent wise, as he gets older in age or any of these players, we've seen it time and again that, 1 year they're just on fire. The next year they don't have it and they might not have it again. So there's a lot of risk being taken on from the organizational standpoint. So if you put your GM hat on, from a business standpoint, what part of this makes sense and how are they able to manage risk with a lot of these players in the terms that they're signing them to and the ridiculous amount of money they're also shelling out here?
Well, here's the catch-22. It's you want to extend your young players, your young stars, you do this, right? But I do understand why there's hesitation because they haven't proven it over time in the big leagues. That's what people are looking at is how much are you banking that your superstar that you believe is a cornerstone is going to continue to play that way for the next 7 or 8 years? That is that business risk that you're referring to. But when you look at a guy like, in this case, Bobby Witt Jr., that it seems like he just gets better and better every year. He had 30 jacks last season. It's a guy that you want to build around. You are banking that he is going to be that player. And for me, I look at it when the player ops start to happen. So at 7 years, that's when the options start to change. If you get 6 really good years from Bobby Witt Jr., I would say it's a success with that. And the other incentives off of it for him to make more money is going to be based off his play. So they are taking care of themselves to a certain extent. Now and Brandon brings up here, this is what teams get worried about. And this was a different situation when you talked about with Chris Davis. Chris Davis balled out for years. But then his window or shelf life, he was getting older. Some of these players signed these deals. Bobby Witt Jr. is 23, Corbin Carroll, early 20s, Julio Rodriguez, early 20s. Gunnar Henderson, if they were able to extend him, it's not going to happen because Scott Boras is his agent. But all of those things come into play. So for people to understand that, if you really believe a player, you can protect yourself, but also gives the player the incentive that they feel like there's a stability, because a lot of players right now, here's another example. Cedric Mullins is not a free agent yet, and he's going to be 31 when he's a free agent. So look at all the years Cedric has had to put together in order to get the free agency. Guys will jump at an opportunity, even if it is maybe quote unquote devaluing their pick for right now. But the Orioles have a lot of decisions, and another guy they're going to have to decide on is kind of like goes into it, Kevin. When we did the Corbin Burns live stream, Corbin Burns is another free agent that his deal's up, and if he balls out this year, his price tag is going to go way up.
Yeah, and look, that's a different situation because you're talking about these early 20s extensions. You're paying for the future, essentially, if you're a team. With a guy like Corbin Burns, there's no guarantee the Orioles extend him. They gave up good prospects to go get him. But look, if he balls out this year for the Orioles and they feel like he's a fit for their rotation, it's a very young rotation, by the way. Corbin Burns is an ace. He's a number one. And you have a guy like Kyle Bradish and Grayson Rodriguez and John Means, Dean Kramer. That's that's one of the best rotations in baseball. And if you can have a stability of Corbin Burns there, it's going to cost money if he does well this season. It's going to cost money regardless. The team's going to pay him. But I'm excited to see kind of where they go with these extensions because, Adley has to get one. Gunnar has to get one. Jackson Holiday has to get one. So I think, to me, we're seeing the shift in these young, players are young. They're getting these extensions because you're right, Ryan. These players, stability is key. You want the long-term stability of a deal, but for an organization, you see a guy, you trust the guy. It's a lot of money to pay for the future, but with a guy like Adley, you know what you're going to get for the most. There's no guarantee, Adley could fall off a cliff. Bobby Witt could fall off a cliff. But I think that we're moving in that direction with the MLB because the team wants stability and they want to get their guy, and the player wants the stability too. But there is a risk in both sides. With Corbin Burns, he's 29, turning 30, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a little bit of a different situation when it comes to what you're looking at, extension terms, and just, you're not going to give Corbin Burns 20-year extension, let's say, but he could get a very hefty, very long extension. We'll see how it goes for him.
Well, and again, that's the point I want to try to put out here when we're talking about extending. It takes two to tango, and also you got to look at where people are in their careers. And the Braves are the only team that have truly done it and be going, how do you get away with this? Because they extended so many of their young guys early, including Acuna Jr., Ozzie Albies, and all these guys. Each team is left with a different map. The Braves had a lot of young players coming up, and that's why with the Orioles, I don't think that they're going to follow that same map that the Braves have, but they are going to have questions because their pipeline is so loaded, and if they want to keep guys, they're going to have to make some decisions. The Braves have spent a lot. They've kept guys, but at some point here, their window of doing this is going to change because their players are going to get older, obviously. So we'll find out what happens then and there. But for the Kansas City Royals, you got a player, and keep in mind that was the same draft as Adley Rutschman. Bobby Witt Jr. really is, if you don't know his name, he's one of the best shortstops. He is one of the best players, and he's only going to get better, in my opinion. And watching him, it's really, really impressive. But you don't hear a lot about him if you're not a baseball fan or you're not a Royals fan, because they played for Kansas City and they've done really terribly over the years. And you're talking about rebuilding, by the way. The Orioles and Kansas City were in similar spots. And all of a sudden, the Orioles have built up the system. Kansas City's had a really tough problem with that. So they are hoping that they made a lot of moves this offseason in a wide open AL Central, and Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be their face of the franchise for years to come, and they rightfully should.
I think, I got to say this quickly before it catches back up to my mouth, but I think it's one of those situations where you spend 250, 300 million now in hopes of saving 200 million later, because if Bobby Witt continues on the pace that he's on, in 6 years, he would be getting a $400+ million, especially with how contracts keep rising. He'd be hitting close to $500 million. So I think it's smart by the Royals. Brad, like you said, there is risk to it, obviously. But I think with a young talent like that, you're willing to take that risk, especially because, like Ryan just said, they were in the same spot as the Orioles, losing games and putting up disappointing seasons. And then I believe last year when the Orioles had 8 guys in the top 100, the Royals had 0 after Bobby Witt graduated. So it is a tough time for them and their prospects. So that's why you have to lock down a guy like Bobby Witt.
Lock it down. And to answer Raven Ron's question right here for a second, with these big contracts, typically how much is deferred until their 40s and 50s? We're starting the Bobby Bonilla deal. If you guys remember, that's Bobby Bonilla Day, right? All the time. Like that's a day. And then you saw Shohei Ohtani's deferring so much. More players, I think, are starting to defer more money. Chris Davis is still on the payroll. What?
Nobody can hear me, but I was going to say Chris Davis.
Let me get him.
Rocker says Chris Davis.
Well, so that's what I was explaining right there. Chris Davis is on the Orioles payroll this year. He deferred money. I think that's a conversation that more and more players are doing because I think, one, it's genius. But I think what the Dodgers just did this year is going to have to change on the next negotiations because they are deferring so much money now. The players deferring it, but it allowed them so much more flexibility. And I don't know if Major League Baseball is fully happy with that, if that makes sense. So, but if I'm a player, I would try to defer as much money as possible because when your career's over, it's over. Why not be able to, at the right point, be able to add more money down the stretch? We'll see what's happening. So it's very interesting. Austin, just because I would like to answer the Orioles questions too. Based off this deal, Adley probably signs a 7-year, $210 deal. Here's the thing with Adley, his age. His age is a big component here where Adley is looking at one big contract and maybe can get another one. This is a very good deal, but how long is Adley going to be catching and how long then is he consistently going to be the bat that he is? He's not Gunnar Henderson age where he's younger and he's still going to, if he signed an early contract, and get another one. So Adley, if I'm him and our Adley, I'm not going to take a discount. I'm going to wait for it to be the right deal. Not saying it's a discount for a guy like Bobby Witt Jr., but he was still going to have to go through years of arbitration and go through more time in order to get a deal. Now that's done. And yeah, come on in here. Rocco wants to come on in here for a second. We actually might fix the camera to get Rocco. So did you want to touch on things more with Chris Davis?
You saw what the Braves did when they got the deals done with Acuna Jr. and Ozzie Albies. Remember that? How they got them basically on a discount. I don't think the Orioles are going to get anyone on a discount, but I think like you guys were talking about, if you get them at the right time, early-ish, because the ceilings for Adley, Gunnar, Jackson Holiday, they're super high. So you want to get them while you can.